here.
Halo 4, truly the black sheep of the Halo games, for many reasons, but they all tie back to the major fact that this would be the first mainline Halo game to be developed by another company, 343 Industries. When Bungie left Microsoft after finishing Halo Reach, they immediately went on to work on their own projects. What Moneysoft would shortly realize, however, is how big of a franchise Halo had become. Microsoft did own Halo as an IP, so they couldn't just leave it to die and not make them any money. This is where 343 comes in. 343 Industries was a new developer under Microsoft whose entire purpose was to make Halo games. Technically, their first project was Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, but that wasn't a real game. Their first game would obviously be Halo 4. However, 343 was not Bungie, and this would show. 343's vision of the Halo franchise would be something different. So what was it? Well, with the new development team working on Halo 4, there was one huge change that completely impacted everyone's view on 343 and highlighted what they wanted for the Halo franchise. Was it the gameplay? No. Was it the campaign? No. The biggest change that 343 made was the art style. Now yes, the graphics of the game really don't matter at all. However, the art style of the game does matter a lot. And Halo has always had a unique art style. However, if I'm being honest, my biggest problem with the look of this game probably isn't even the art style of it. It's probably just a complete abandonment of the original games. Like seriously, they changed almost everything for no logical reason. The elites look more brutish and bulky. The grunts look and sound super ugly. It's like the Covenant was made to be like a scary alien species instead of what they were in the past Halo games. The entire UNSC is much more Tron-y and futuristic with lights instead of being grounded and relatable to us. I remember 343 saying that Cortana changed Master Chief's armor while he slept, but they showed the original Spartan 2s on Harvest to have the same armor. I just don't get it, and it was a very unnecessary change. Also, the soundtrack and sound effects are all different. The sound effects are not bad, but they could have had one sound from the original's return, although the Warthog sounds like pretty bad. The soundtrack has little to no original songs, and there's only like 2 that appear. I don't know, man, it's just such an unnecessary change. The soundtrack does sound good, but Jesus, man. Halo 4 to me is probably the ugliest Halo game in terms of art style and graphics. So, moving past that, how was the multiplayer? Well, to start, the variety of the game modes and maps is actually not bad. They did replace a few game modes to add new ones, but this is a pretty good variety. Probably the most unique game mode is Dominion, which in comparison to the other big game modes from the other games, like Invasion or Warzone, this is by far the weakest. But still, it is pretty good when compared to a normal game mode. Infection is now called Flood, and this infection is not Halo Reach or Halo 5, but because the zombies are just like too powerful. But yeah, I could go on, but there are a really good amount of game modes in this game. However, there is one big problem, but I'll get to it later. Also, the progression in this game is actually pretty good. A lot of people say that this is the best progression out of all the games, and I can probably agree. It is a mix of Halo 3 and Halo Reach, where you have to complete challenges to get some armors and cosmetics, and you have to spend currency to get others. It is a good mix and combines the best of both worlds, and I think it works. Now, it is time for the maps. This game, hands down, has the weakest map selection out of all the games. not counting Halo 2 Anniversary, but that isn't saying anything. All the maps are aesthetically ugly and have basic geometry. Most of them blend together and are not memorable at all. They don't stand out and they don't really enhance the gameplay. Probably the only maps that are interesting are the 2 remakes, Pit and Valhalla, and Haven, which looks so much better in Halo 5. Forge maps are a thing now, and honestly probably look better than most of these maps. It is just amazing how unappeasing it is to look at these maps, and the Forge maps are just simple colors and easy on the eyes. But yeah, pretty bad map selection. Now, the weapon sandbox in this game is absolutely the worst in the Halo series, but it is still good. Maybe better than Halo 2 Anniversary. But yeah, anyway, the weapon sandbox suffers because of redundancy and just bad guns. This game has 3 weapon factions, UNSC, Covenant, and it dropped Brutes for Promethean. But they still have the Gravity Hammer. Now, the Promethean weapons are all pretty similar to the UNSC weapons, and yes, that is a bad thing. The scatter shot is just a shotgun, the light rifle is just a battle rifle, and the DMR when zoomed in. The suppressor is just an assault rifle, and yeah, you get the point. The bolt shot is pretty much the only creative addition, and it's actually pretty fun to use. The Covenant weapons in this game aren't bad, but they're all just so bland in this game. For one, the Storm Rifle is just a try not to fall asleep challenge, and they all blend together. They don't have a lot of ammo and are just boring iterations of what they used to be. The UNSC weapons are also not the most interesting, and a lot of them sound super arcadey. You know, if I could describe like the feel of the entire weapon sandbox, I would say it feels like too arcadey. And the vehicle sandbox is absolutely the worst in any Halo game, dude. And it is actually kind of bad compared to other games. There are no new vehicles, and all the vehicles that did return are bland. But actually, yeah, I lied. There is a Mantis, but the Mantis is kind of bland and sounds super clanky and has no physics on it. Like seriously, it cannot be flipped upside down or at all. Like what the hell? And yes, there are new vehicles that have been added to Forge, like the Pelican or Saber, but these are just so unbalanced that they really only affect Forge or very specific custom games. And the rest of the vehicles, like I said, are just bland, and some feel arcadey. All in all, Halo 4's weapon sandbox and vehicle sandbox is probably the weakest in the Halo series, and not much to say when it comes to other games. Now, the gameplay of Halo 4. As I've said 17 times now, the gunplay does feel arcadey, and yes, I don't like that. The movement is what you'd expect, although they did bring back armor abilities and made sprint a default ability. Sprint in this game is super bad. It feels very floaty and is limited. Limited sprint is so dumb and I hate it. However, the Spartan abilities are pretty good and in some ways, better than Reach's Spartan abilities. Now, things to get out of the way is that sprint is a default ability, of course, and playable elites and not make a return, which is the dumbest precedent this game set for the future. But anyway, in Halo 4, the abilities are more balanced and, in some ways, more focused than Halo Reach. They brought back active camo, which is useless, other abilities like jetpack and hologram. They also evolved the other abilities to be more balanced or useful. Evade turned into thrust, Armor Lock turned into Hard Light Shield, which both of these are some great additions. They also brought back Regeneration Field and Auto Sentry from Halo 3, and added Promethean Vision, which, you know, you can see through walls with it, which is just, like, perfect, whatever. But yeah, Halo 4's gameplay is not anything special, and in many ways, does crumble. There is a lot of stupid stuff, and the game itself does not feel as good or fluid as the other titles. The only thing really going for it is that it is unique. Still better than Halo 2 Anniversary. Now, probably the most insulting part of this game's multiplayer is the blatant attempt to steal an audience from Call of Duty. There are now loadouts in this game which actually ruin the best part of Halo multiplayer that were the fair starts. That was part of the skill gap, the moment-to-moment progression, and the overall gameplay of Halo. In Halo 4, you choose the best weapons, grenades, armor abilities, and perks to spawn better than your opponents. Then you get a bunch of kills with those better weapons to get kill streaks, and then you die and then see a kill cam. This game is just so obvious in what it tried to do, and it is hilarious that it didn't work, because you know what game Halo 4 was going up against in 2012? It's gonna be embarrassing, guys. Black Ops 2. Now, with a Call of Duty-like system, but with Halo weapons, how is the balancing? Well, it is absolute monkey joke. There are just so many different power weapons and abilities being used on the map all at once that the strategy of this game just flies out of the window. It is like Super Fiesta, and that is just the normal game modes, you know? All of these main game modes have this, so this is literally the only experience you will be having if you play Halo 4, which is just perfect. Now yes, this multiplayer does do a lot of things wrong, very wrong, but there's still a lot of things to enjoy, and there's a reason I prefer this to Halo 2 Anniversary. The normal multiplayer, while crazy, can still be a great deal of fun. It is fun to just try things out and see if they work. It is enjoyable when you don't have to take it too seriously. And yes, there are competitive game modes that have pre-made loadouts, and the difference is just night and day. These semi-fair starts just calm the game down so much, and it is my preferred way of playing. I would say that there's a lot of problems with Halo 4's multiplayer, but it is something that I can still enjoy. Now, the Forge mode in this game is apparently bad to some people, and I guess I can see why, but I think it's a welcomed addition to the Forge series. To me, it is like a different version of Reach's Forge, but now with different possibilities and things to do. It does feel like an innovation of Reach's Forge. However, there is no Forge world, and it does lack the spirit of Forge. However, the custom games it produced are probably top 3 in the series. People really did some good things with Halo 4's tools, and I personally really like it. Stuff like City of Grey, Slenderman, and all these creative new game modes really show what Halo 4 was capable of. I'm telling you, Halo 4 would be the most popular game in the MCC if it was added to the custom browser. Now obviously, a new company working on a game would take the mechanics and artistry in a new direction. But in what direction did 343 take the story? Well, this is the first game that would be set after Halo 3, which in the eyes of many was the perfect ending to the Halo franchise. Although, while I do agree that Microsoft only continued the franchise for money, Bungie already had hinted at what would come next with the legendary ending. So that was the focus of Halo 4. Well, before I actually get into and dissect the story, I have to talk about the level design, as always. Halo 4 has some interesting level design. Everybody seems to think that this is the worst campaign in terms of level design, but I think it goes deeper than that. But if you want a straight answer first, then yes, I do think that this is probably the weakest Halo campaign in terms of level design. But don't forget what I said in the Halo 2 review. This campaign is still very good in comparison to most first-person shooters. The game also has a lot of fresh mechanics with most of the levels. Like on the level Reclaimer, you have that giant mammoth that you help protect and operate. On Shutdown, you have the first ever flyable pelican that also acts as a weapons and ammo bench. The game really has a lot of cool set pieces, my favorite being the level Composer, which has you fight on the research station in the orbit of a Halo ring. Like, how cool is that? The creativity of this campaign definitely went unnoticed, and mostly, these one-offs really do enhance the enjoyment of the game. However, I do think that the game does suffer from some annoying repetition and sometimes shallow and boring arenas, but for the most part, the level design is pretty consistent. But there's one very important part of the level design in first-person shooters that has a huge impact on the enjoyment of them. The enemy design of Halo 4 is definitely the campaign's biggest weakness. To start off, the Covenant in this game have pretty dumb AI and are pretty easy to cheese. But that isn't even the problem. In Halo 4, their sandbox and whole aesthetic just makes them kind of uninteresting to fight. The hunters in this game are usually there to just stop the action and act as a mini boss fight, which is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Also, the weapons in this game do not have enough ammo. Like, seriously, it is garbage. I think the only thing that really stands out to me as good about the Covenant in this game is the fact that you can destroy the Phantoms. Now, the Prometheans in this game are really the true problem. On paper, they sound smart and balanced to fight, but in game, they're just so frustrating. The Knights and Watchers are the worst pair ever. They both are able to revive each other and always come in two, so you're forced to just shoot the Watcher first and then rush the Knight before it can make another Watcher. And also, you shoot the Watcher and they shell up and just fly away, so it is even more annoying. Also, the Knight has some unfair moves, bro. Like the teleport kill thing, where at any time it can just teleport to you and one-shot you with the melee, which the melees are just impossible to even see coming. This is just so dumb, and it makes them very annoying to fight. Also, the crawlers in this game are kind of satisfying to kill because they explode. And honestly, they're not too bad in gameplay, but what the hell is that design, dude? Why would the Forerunners ever make that to fight the Flood? Where's the consistency? Yeah, so the level design in this game has some really good creativity, but is held back by the poor enemy design. And to be honest, this might just be the weakest Halo level design. Also, there are those Call of Duty QuickTime events which are just so stupid and unnecessary. I remember, not to spoil anything yet, but in the end game, I was playing with a buddy and we were approaching a guy, and I pulled out my hardlight shield for no reason. And then he did the same thing, and then I realized that he thought it was going to be a boss fight. And that made me realize how much of a missed opportunity there was just to have some stupid QuickTime event where all you have to do is press like 2 buttons and then you win. Nothing. Brain dead. So yeah, that pisses me off. But the level design in this game is still overall decent. Just weaker than the other Halo games.
Tell me about the children. Dr. Halsey.
You already know everything.
You kidnapped them.
Children's minds are more easily accepting of indoctrination. Their bodies more adaptable to augmentation. The result was the ultimate soldier. And because of our success, when the Covenant invaded, we were ready.
Dr. Halsey, you're bending history for your own favor, and you know it. You developed the Spartans to crush human rebellion, not to fight the Covenant.
When one human world after another fell, when my Spartans were all that stood between humanity and extinction, nobody was concerned about why they were originally built.
So you feel in the end your choices were justified?
My work saved the human race.
Do you think the Spartans' lack of basic humanity helped?
What are you after? The others before you were naval intelligence, but you're something else.
Records show Spartans routinely exhibited mildly sociopathic tendencies, difficulty with socialization and verbalization.
The records show efficient behavior operating in hazardous situations. I supplied the tools to maintain that efficiency.
Do you believe the Master Chief succeeded because he was, at his core, broken?
What does John have to do with this? You want to replace him?
The Master Chief is dead.
His file reads missing in action.
Catherine. Spartans never die.
Your mistake is seeing Spartans as military hardware. My Spartans are humanity's next step. Our destiny as a species. Do not underestimate them. But most of all, do not underestimate him.
So this is the first cutscene in Halo 4, and there's a lot to unpack. So let's start with the context of this scene. Halsey here is being interrogated, not interviewed, and the reason why is pretty much the story of the UNSC and their place in the Galactic War. Halsey was originally a UNSC scientist with an idea to create super soldiers to crush insurrectionists and human rebellion. However, in order to do this, she kidnapped numerous young children, usually around the age of 6, to reconstruct them into being killing machines. Their entire childhood ripped away from them to serve the UNSC. This is obviously messed up, but when the Covenant attacked, the Spartans were what led the successes of the human race. But the intent of Halsey was still there, so the UNSC caught on and labeled her as a war criminal. However, Halsey would also grow to form strong bonds with the Spartan 2s, and this is why she reacts like she does when the Master Chief is mentioned. Now, the cutscene itself is basically just the interrogator doing his work and Halsey defending herself, but the guy kind of hones in on a topic, being the humanity of the Spartans. And while all the other stuff is new too, it really does set the tone about Halo 4 and the direction that it is taking. Because the Spartan 2s, having their entire life and choice being ripped away from them at such a young age, are almost like child soldiers that were taught only violence and war. So the humanity of these Spartans is something that Halo would have focused on sooner than later. So yeah, this scene does a really good job of setting up the themes of what's to come. However, there are some problems with this scene, like the art style. This is pretty much the only scene where the events happen before Halo 3, so seeing the Spartans and Covenant looking like this is just wrong. And 343 has later come back to these points in the universe with other stories, and they looked correct. So these war flashbacks, which to mine, they are the Spartans fighting on Harvest for the first time against the Covenant. These flashbacks are just fake. Also, the guy interrogating Halsey never reveals himself, and it is kind of weird, but I guess he's just a government guy. But guys, Master Chief is one of my favorite characters in all of media, but up to this point in the games, he hasn't really been that deep. But with Halo 4, that comes to an end.
Wake up, Chief. I need you.
So yes, this is a good way to reignite Master Chief's story. It has nods to the older games and the tension of what's about to happen. The level that happens after this cutscene, Dawn, is a very important level to a major part of how 343 handled Chief. For the first time ever, Chief talks during gameplay. This doesn't seem like much, but Halo 4 is really the first time where the game wants the player to look at Chief and his adventure throughout the universe, rather than through Chief. We also sometimes have little windows of Cortana, so she expresses herself a lot more. Now, Dawn as a level plays as a playable cutscene for the first half, and any other time where Chief talks, it isn't really that revealing or important, so it isn't really that big of a deal. But still, it shows the direction that the story is taking the character. Chief and Cortana navigate the ship to find out what is happening. The ship seems to be falling apart, and these bursts of EMP energy occasionally come by. Master Chief then comes across an elite which swings his sword at him. Chief asks Cortana about what happened to the Covenant Alliance, and Cortana says that a lot can happen in 4 years. They move into the ship and realize that not only did they get caught into the pull of a huge foreigner planet, they also are being attacked by a Covenant fleet. Cortana seems to have little glitches in her speech, but Chief brushes it aside. They go for the frigate's weapon system and fire it manually to fire a missile into the Covenant ship. They fire it, but the planet opens up and starts pulling with massive force. Chief tries to resist, but the planet pulls in the entire frigate, and Chief and Cortana fall in.
Where are we?
Checking coordinate impact data.
We have asked you to give up your family, your childhood, your future.
Cortana,
I'm sorry. It's the crash. I'm fine.
something was wrong even before we left the Dawn.
Chief? Really? I'm fine.
Cortana.
I was put into service 8 years ago.
8 years.
AIs deteriorate after 7, Chief.
Halsey.
Chief.
We need to find Halsey.
Chief, please.
She made you. She can fix you.
I won't recover from rampancy, Chief.
If we can just get back to Earth and find Halsey, she can fix this.
Don't make a girl a promise you can't keep. We need to move.
John, being at his core broken, doesn't have the emotional maturity to handle a situation like this. Cortana has been alongside him for the past 8 years, and they have grown to have a special bond. So when the possibility of losing her comes up, he slightly panics before having to focus on the mission at hand again. Cortana, being shown to have already thought about the possibilities of her future, has already made up her mind, but she is aware of the effect that this would have on John. Chief and Cortana start navigating through this new planet they landed on. The wreckage of Forward Unto Dawn is all around them, and they come across many beautiful foreigner buildings. Cortana eventually brings up her rampancy to Chief and says that if they got back to Halsey and used her DNA, she could be renewed. Chief agrees and finds the Covenant to be on the planet. Chief focuses on finding out why the Covenant is even on the planet, and they end up making their way to a foreigner cartographer. However, as Chief is fighting the Covenant, Cortana picks up a human signal and traces it back to a ship called Infinity. However, she can't trace where the signal of the ship is. Once they get to the cartographer, Cortana again tries to track Infinity's signal. She successfully finds it to be inside of the planet, which they learn to be called Requiem. They decide to use a terminus to portal to the planet's core. They see getting to Infinity as a way to save Cortana. Now, so far, this story has been interesting and engaging. Of course, because of the writing in this game is pretty good, but also the plot. Up to this point, Chief and you, the player, have grown to care about Cortana, and a more character-driven story like this is bound to be interesting. And I will say that sometimes the drama is a bit too much for a game like Halo, but it stays consistent within the purpose of the narrative.
According to the cathedral, this terminus is just one node of a larger transit grid that spans the entire planet.
What?
When I tried to access the outlet closest to Infinity's transmissions, the system responded with this.
What is it?
That's the kicker. It's the Forerunner symbol for Reclaimer.
Humanity. That's got to be Infinity. Can you get us to those coordinates?
Let me try to open a portal.
Cortana.
I'm picking up unknown energy signatures.
Where?
This can't be right.
Set a waypoint out of the tower. Cortana?
How did... Quick! Into the portal! Chief, go!
Chief and Cortana get to the center of the planet to find a huge beam. Cortana says that the beam is what has been disrupting the signal, so they focus on deactivating the beam. In order to get back to the location where the beam is powered from, they use the portal system in the planet. As Chief fights the Prometheans, Cortana is able to identify them and give information on them. As Chief deactivates the power to the beams, Cortana is able to pick up more from Infinity. She realizes that they are actually not inside the planet at all, and are instead about to enter it to rescue them. Cortana tells Chief to hurry so Infinity doesn't make a mistake, and Chief quickly gets to the communication center.
Infinity, this is Sierra 117 of the UNSC forward unto dawn. Do you copy? Infinity, do you read?
Chief? Chief, let go of the contacts.
Find us an exit.
Don't wait around on my account.
So fades the great harvest of my betrayal. Even these beasts recognize what you were oblivious to, human. Your nobility has blinded you, as ever. The Librarian left little to chance, didn't she? Turning my own guardians, my own world, against me. But what hubris to believe she could protect her pets from me forever. If you haven't mastered even these primitives, then man has not attained the mantle. Your ascendance may yet be prevented. Time was your ally, human. But now it has abandoned you. The Forerunners have returned. This tomb is now yours.
Subspace rupture! Chief, move!
Now, this cutscene is the first instance of this game where not only did it have a lot of potential, it is also dumb, all while still having good character. First of all, the Didact is overpowered. They should not have given him mind control abilities like that just to unite the Prometheans and Covenant. Like, seriously, maybe it would have been okay if he turned the Prometheans, but not the Covenant. And I haven't even gotten to the Covenant yet because it's not focused on at all in this story. But the same reason the Covenant even came to Requiem is the reason they would have easily just been okay with the Didact. And then the Didact instantly fries some cover and force chokes Master Chief to hold him over magma. Now, this is so stupid because now all the stakes are gone. At this point, the Didact has no respect for Chief and definitely doesn't need him alive. So the only way Chief would even survive this is bad writing. And that is exactly what happens. I say that the scene had potential because of how the Didact talks. Now, again, I don't want to talk about it yet because the story didn't focus on anything about the Didact before this, so when he talks, it sounds like he's just saying nothing but in a Shakespearean way to sound cool. If you know the backstory to the scene, you wouldn't think that, but the story doesn't even focus on that, so you do think that. The Didact, with all his lore intact, is an actual good character, and the music in the scene really does show potential. I'll talk about this more later though. Chief quickly runs away and gets on a ghost. They have to get out of there before they blow away, so they start going. Cortana says that the Didact tricked them into releasing them by manipulating the signals. She eventually regains access to the portal system and Chief goes into the portal at full speed. They teleport to a jungle and barely stay on the edge of a cliff. However, the Infinity has already entered the planet and is about to crash land. The Didact, in his vehicle, then immediately goes after Infinity. Chief starts to follow.
Stay low. Recon sortie heading this way. The ship looks intact.
Something tells me that's only because the Didact wanted it that way.
This is Lasky to UNSC Infinity. We're up to an extra bad guys down here. Does anyone read?
This is Sierra 117 of the UNSC forward under Dawn. We're on station, ready to assist.
Negative copy. Sounded like you said forward under Dawn. Come again.
Signal's bouncing in and out. I can't clean it up.
Light up their friend or foe tags. We're gonna need something to zero in on.
Chief then fights through the jungle and finds a few dead Marines along the way. All until he gets into contact with Infinity. The door opens and Officer Lasky is the first to introduce himself to Chief. Then we get the infamous "I thought you'd be taller" line from Commander Palmer. Now, a lot of people hate the character of Palmer for this, which is fine, but I feel that people really mistake hating a character for thinking that a character is written poorly. I'm personally fine with this remark, and it just builds up for Palmer to be more of a confident leader, still having the possibility of being too confident to be a character arc. Anyway, Lasky talks with Captain Del Rio, the captain of the Infinity. Lasky then asks Chief to help with defending Infinity, so that is what Chief does. Chief then fights and helps Infinity's forces all around the area by killing both Prometheans and Covenant. He eventually gets inside Infinity and comes into contact with Del Rio. Del Rio gives him a mantis and Chief starts shooting massive amounts of enemy forces. Chief eventually gets to Infinity's weapon systems and has to manually activate them. The Infinity fires everything it has at the Didact and is able to send it to retreat.
What I want to know, people, is where the hell did those things come from?
It's possible that they're native to Requiem, or whatever counts as native for a Forerunner AI.
We've never seen this type of offensive reaction from any of the other installations.
Other installations?
Mr. Lasky.
Infinity's mission has been to locate the remaining Halo rings, and establish permanent bases to study them for decommission. We got locations up and running around installations 5 and 3, but lately they've run into some setbacks.
A science team got zapped excavating a Forerunner artifact. This sensor data is all that was left.
Interesting. These symbols are a derivation of the Forerunner glyph system.
And our geeks managed to pull some coordinates. I'll give you 3 guesses where it led.
Sir, Gypsy Company is prepped and ready to roll on your orders.
Thank you, Palmer. Mr. Lasky, you take point. I want boots on the ground in 60.
Captain.
This is a first contact scenario, Master Chief. Priority is to free Infinity from Requiem's gravity well and file a threat assessment back at FleetCom.
You mean we're leaving?
Sir, Infinity drove the Didact back. He's vulnerable.
He isn't the only one. You know, I think you, of all people, would appreciate the benefit of living to fight another day.
Now, this cutscene explains why Infinity even came to Requiem in the first place. Infinity was created to locate the remaining Halo rings and to take control of them and study them. A team that was researching a ring was able to uncover coordinates that led to Requiem. This might seem small, but it does kind of show the evolution of the universe and its inhabitants in the 4 years that Chief was drifting in space. Also, we see that Del Rio seems to have a shorter temper than the usual commander. Del Rio sends Chief and Cortana along with Lasky to deactivate a Forerunner device that is keeping the Infinity from leaving Requiem. A large number of UNSC forces along with an elephant are sent to push on to the device's location. They plan to locate the device and with the target designator and blow it up. Along the way, Cortana keeps showing signs of rampancy, but John calms her down. Cortana explains how rampancy works, showing more signs of desperation in her situation. The elephant locates a Forerunner structure and Chief is sent to investigate it. As Chief goes deeper into the structure, he sees a database that he can insert Cortana into. However, it seems to suck Cortana in, and Chief quickly starts running aimlessly trying to find out how to get Cortana back. However, he stumbles across a very bright light.
Who are you?
I am what remains of the Forerunner, once known as the Librarian. My memories were retained to assist humanity on their path to the mantle. Though sadly, that plan is now at risk. The Didact is leaving Requiem. Soon. You must not allow it.
Leaving?
He seeks this. The Composer. A device which will allow him to finally contain the greatest enemy ever faced by the Forerunners. You. Mankind spread into the stars with an unexpected, desperate violence. Entire systems fell before the Didact's warrior servants rose to halt the aggression. When the Didact finally exhausted the humans after a millennia, his sentence was severe. We had no way of knowing that the Forerunners were not your only enemy. Humanity hadn't been expanding. They were running. Weakened from our conflict, we were no match for the parasite which pursued you. The Forerunners made plans for a final great journey, but the Didact refused to yield our mantle of responsibility. He would save all life in the galaxy, at a cost. In the Forerunner's quest for transcendence, the Composer had been intended to bridge the organic and digital realms. It would have made us immortal. But its results soured. The stored personalities fragmented, and our attempts to return them to biological states created only abominations. Such moral concerns faded from the Didact's attention. The Flood only assimilated living tissue. The Composer would provide the Didact his solution and his revenge.
The Prometheans. They're human.
They were only the beginning. He would have encrypted your entire race if we had not removed the Composer from his care and imprisoned him here. Reclaimer. When I indexed mankind for repopulation, I hid seeds from the Didact. Seeds which would lead to an eventuality. Your physical evolution, your combat skin, even your ancilla Cortana. You are the culmination of 1,000 lifetimes of planning.
Planning for what?
He has found us.
Even in death, her meddling continues.
Reclaimer. The gene song I placed within you contains many gifts, including an immunity to the Composer. But it must be unlocked.
How?
Relinquish your contact essence.
Your evolutionary journey must be accelerated.
Can I defeat the Didact without it?
No.
Then do it.
Prepare.
Now, this is probably the most controversial cutscene in the game because a lot of people think that this is Halo 4's story. And the cutscene itself is a lot to unpack, but I also don't get the criticism because I thought it was pretty obvious that the primary story of this game was a Chief and Cortana adventure with stopping the Didact from doing damage. Halo 4 to me is almost like a base story and then an extreme amount of depth beneath it. The only problem is that you need a lot of context to be able to fully appreciate the depth of the story. And a good chunk of that context will not be found in the actual game, rather in stuff like terminals, other media, and sometimes even Spartan Ops. But you should be able to understand this cutscene if you pay attention. Basically, a crazy amount of time in the past, ancient humans came across the Flood, which absolutely started to do major damage. The ancient humans started to flee, and eventually started to go through foreigner territory, in which in a panicky manner started the conflict between them. This is how the Forerunner and ancient human war started. The humans were doing good until the Didact came in with his forces and neutralized the humans. Some were killed and some were captured. However, the Flood caught up to the Foreigners and they were unprepared. A lot of desperate measures were taken, including, this is important, the Composer. The Composer was meant to digitalize and immortalize life, but instead it created atrocities. However, these atrocities were not of actual life, so Flood could not infect them. These were the Prometheans, which were originally mostly captured humans. This, however, was not okay because the Didact was using the Composer in a corrupt way, and the Didact had the Composer taken away from him, and he himself was imprisoned on Requiem to meditate. The Flood was eventually too much, so the Foreigners used their created Halo rings to wipe out all life and starve the Flood, with seeds for new life being planted by the Sentinels and Monitors in the future. This would become life as we know it. However, now that the Didact has been reawakened, he still has the intent to finish off the humans and use the Composer to control them. The Librarian, however, rapidly evolves Chief's DNA to be immune to the Composer, and this is Chief's objective, to stop the Didact from composing humanity. Now yes, that was a lot of information, and to be honest, I did leave out good chunks of information that would have explained a lot more. But that is just what the game explains. And you see how this is just a more complex version of the baseline storyline that Halo 4 tells? It is basically just an answer to what the Composer actually does, not just Didact destroys humanity. Now yes, context and reason is very important in stories, and I'm not excusing Halo 4, but this is not a make or break cutscene for the story. So people who say they still have no idea what's going on in Halo 4's story are just dumb guys. So anyway, Chief gets Cortana back and they make their way out of this foreign structure. The mission, however, is not yet complete, so that is what they focus on. However, Infinity takes major damage from the Didact but is able to recover. Chief marks the device and it is destroyed. The team regroups and goes back to Infinity.
Target locked! Firing perfect!
Infinity cannot handle that kind of punishment. Not again.
This isn't about us or this ship anymore.
Sir, we've seen what the Didact is capable of. If we let him leave this world, humanity will be at risk.
Look, I understand what you think you saw.
Think?
With all due respect, sir, I know what I saw.
And with all due respect to you, soldier, I'm not willing to jeopardize my ship because of the hallucinations of an aging Spartan and his malfunctioning AI.
Sir, what if he's right?
Nav, as soon as we know we're airtight, I want a course laid into Caranay Station. Com, prepare a warning beacon.
I will not allow you to leave this planet!
Cortana.
I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to do that.
Commander Lasky. Pursuant to Article 55 of UNSC Regulation 12-14572, I'm ordering you to remove that AI's data chip and retire it for final dispensation.
I don't want to. You don't want me to.
Remove
Please.
the chip now, Commander.
Please. I don't want to.
Give me that chip.
The Didact has to be stopped. If you won't do that, I will.
I am ordering you to surrender that AI!
No, sir.
Lieutenant! Arrest that man!
Captain!
Arrest him!
Captain!
Get word to Earth that trouble is coming. Cortana and I will do what we can back here.
Now, a lot of people have a problem with how Del Rio was written in this story. He never really had a reason to act the way he did, and to be honest, I do agree. I really think that there's no reason he should have treated the Chief the way he did in this scene. However, I still think he has reason. Both sides do. Del Rio just almost had his ship destroyed, so he didn't want to risk dying to the Didact. He would rather just retreat and inform the rest of the UNSC of this threat. And there is some logic to not trusting Chief, especially with how his AI is operating. So yeah, I don't think that Del Rio is that bad.
I can give you over 40,000 reasons why I know that sun isn't real. I know it because the emitter's Rayleigh effect is disproportionate to its suggested size. I know it because its stellar cycle is more symmetrical than that of an actual star. But for all that, I'll never actually know if it looks real, if it feels real. Before this is all over, promise me you'll figure out which one of us is the machine.
So what's your plan?
Infinity's tracked the Didact's vessel to a docking structure southeast of here. We'll jump ship as Infinity exits the roof.
You know, I was sent down here with orders to prevent you from leaving. In case you'd already gone, I took the precaution of ordering a Pelican, outfitted for full combat pursuit. I hope to God you're wrong about that Forerunner. Or whatever he is, Chief. But in the event you're not. And Chief, Good luck. Both of you.
Come on, Chief. Take a girl for a ride.
This cutscene is one of my favorites. It just captures the tone and spirit of this game very well, and we get some really good character moments. As Cortana is getting deeper into her head, knowing that her days might be numbered, she starts to open up more to Chief. However, John really never developed the emotional maturity to actively connect with Cortana about this. You see him fidgeting with his gun and not really knowing what to say, and Cortana, knowing this, makes a comment about Chief's humanity. Lasky comes in and shows his appreciation for Chief, and I like this. You can see that Lasky really does admire Chief and what he's done. Of course, in the expanded lore, it is shown that Chief actually saved Lasky's life when he was younger, but still. This scene really does show a lot of character within the mood of Halo 4. Chief and Cortana use the Pelican to try and end the Didact. However, the Didact is protected within shields that are being powered by generators in the Forerunner structures, so they deactivate them one by one before finally lowering the shield. However, Didact is already on the move, so Chief boards a Covenant Lich and follows the Didact into slipspace. Didact's ship comes out of slipspace and they arrive at a Halo ring. Chief takes full control of the Lich and they figure out that the Composer isn't actually on the ring, rather in a research station in the orbit of a ring. Chief comes into communication with the station and warns them about what's to come. Chief helps fight off the Covenant in the station before getting into contact with the lead scientist of the team.
I desperately hope you know why all this is happening. Because to be honest, my objectivity isn't doing me a whole lot of good right now. Hold on. I'll start us down.
The device you recovered was a Forerunner weapon. The commander of that ship wants it back.
Wants it back? You don't think you can remove... It can't leave the station. You know that, right?
We don't have any choice, Doctor.
It's not a matter of choice. It took 3 months, and the biggest starship the UNSC could throw at it just to relocate it here. Unless you're a lot stronger than you look. It's not going anywhere.
Can you give Cortana access to the station's supply manifest?
What for?
If we can't move the Composer, we have to make sure the Didact can't either.
Oh, wait. We have years of work invested here.
Inventory lists 7 excavation-grade Havoc mines. Just one of those would turn this base into a piñata.
I'm sorry, Doctor. Keep routing your people to the evac centers. Once we take care of the Composer, you won't have much time.
I'll make sure the nukes are primed so you can detonate them remotely. Maybe next time you rescue us, you can give us more time to pack.
Next time.
This cutscene speaks for itself, and it is one of the most beloved in Halo history. No, it isn't that important to the story, and no, it isn't a turning point in Chief's character arc. It is just a really well-made cutscene that puts the entire universe of Halo into perspective. I don't really need to explain why, but it is stuff like this that makes Halo 4 that much more enjoyable. Anyway, Chief does try to get the nukes online, but Didact removes the Composer from the station. And before anybody can do anything, the Didact composes the station.
They've compromised the station's hull.
The Didact's taken the Composer. Get these people to the evac centers.
Taken how?
Tap the flight deck. Find us something that can carry a payload.
Wait. Something's happening.
Cortana, can you access the station's defense systems?
They're not responding.
Cortana!
Chief, it's... Are you okay? I monitored the data pulse. I could hear them. What was left of them?
We need to move.
These people are gone.
And more will follow if the Didact reaches Earth.
They'll pair you with another AI. Maybe even another Cortana model if Halsey lets them.
That's not going to happen.
It won't be me. You know that, right? Spinning up a broadsword in Hangar C-11. Whatever the Librarian did to you obviously worked.
Cortana. It's not over. Not yet.
Not yet.
In most Halo games, they usually focus more on the epicness and the mystery of the world. Halo 4 really does have more of a grounded and deeper theme. The powerful silence really highlights the impact of what just happened, and you can really feel the pain that Cortana feels when she speaks. You know what she's thinking and the state of mind she's in. Halo 4 really isn't like the other Halo games, and that was for the best. Chief gets in a broadsword and arms it with the nuke. He immediately follows the Didact and once again stays within close proximity with the ship to slip space with it. He starts to shoot down its defenses once the ship has slip spaced, and as he is shooting, Lasky comes into the comms. He tells Chief that Del Rio has been removed due to the way he left the Chief on Requiem, and that he is in charge now. Lasky then uses Infinity's weapons to open a hole into the Didact ship for Chief to fly into. However, the ship gets destroyed as they enter, so Chief picks up the nuke and plans to fire it manually. Master Chief fights through a load of defenses and Prometheans before finally getting to the Didact. However, he is shielded, so Chief inserts Cortana into the system, and Cortana releases fragments of herself to disrupt the system and shielding. Eventually, the shields open and Master Chief walks across the light bridge and approaches the Didact.
You persist too long after your own defeat. Come then, warrior. Have your resolution. So misguided. Humanity's imprisonment is a kindness.
In that case, you won't mind if we return the favor.
Your compassion for mankind is misplaced.
I'm not doing this for mankind.
Master Chief then grabs a grenade and runs towards the Didact and detonates it right on the Didact's head. It stuns him heavily and causes the Didact to fall. Chief then grabs the nuke and detonates it without hesitation.
Cortana. Cortana, do you read? Cortana, come in. How?
Oh, I'm the strangest thing you've seen all day?
But if we're here...
It worked. You did it. Just like you always do.
So how do we get out of here?
I'm not coming with you this time.
What?
Most of me is down there. I only held enough back to get you off the ship.
No. That's not... We go together.
It's already done.
I am not leaving you here.
John. I've waited so long to do that.
It was my job to take care of you.
We were supposed to take care of each other. And we did.
Cortana, please. Wait.
Welcome home, John.
John's entire life of having his childhood ripped from him and being taught only to be a cold-blooded killing machine has resulted in a broken human being. And while he did have allies and friends along the way, nobody as consistent and special to him as Cortana. They both cared for each other for a long time, and it is why Cortana wanted to feel the heartbeat of her longtime companion. John is only in denial when he realizes what Cortana might do. Cortana, still having her personality, always is saddened when she looks at John because she knows what she is about to do. Chief is left speechless because he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't have the maturity to process this. His shoulders shrug as Cortana walks away from him and he is left frozen, and the destruction behind him symbolizing his world falling apart. This scene is just so powerful and perfectly executed.
Mind if I join you?
Of course not, sir.
At ease, Chief. Feels kinda odd for you to call me sir. Beautiful, isn't she? I don't get to see her often enough. I grew up in New Harmony, attended Corbulo Military Academy. Never saw Earth in person until I was an adult, but I still think of her as home. You don't talk much, do you? Chief, I won't pretend to know how you feel. I mean, I've lost people I care about, but never anything like you're going through.
Our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity, whatever the cost.
You say that like soldiers and humanity are two different things. I mean, soldiers aren't machines. We're just people. I'll let you have the deck to yourself.
She said that to me once. About being a machine.
John, losing his best friend, doesn't know how to handle the grief. He isn't emotionally mature enough to handle something like this. When he talks to Lasky, he sounds dead, void of any life. It isn't until Lasky reminds him of what Cortana said that he wakes up a little, but still trying to wrap his mind around grief. Halo 4 tells a very mature story about the human underneath the suit, the humanity behind the soldier. John hides behind his suit of armor and only knows what he was taught. Yet he's still human and he can't brush those characteristics away. It is about when you are ready to step outside the armor that you truly overcome your cracks. And Halo 4 understands this and is the reason Master Chief is truly a special character.
In this hour of victory, we taste only defeat. I ask why. We are forerunners, guardians of all that exists. The roots of the galaxy have grown deep under our careful tending. Where there is life, the wisdom of our countless generations has saturated the soil. Our strength is a luminous sun towards which all intelligence blossoms, and the impervious shelter beneath which it has prospered. I stand before you, accused of the sin of ensuring Forerunner ascendancy, of attempting to save us from this fate where we are forced to recede. Humanity stands as the greatest threat in the galaxy. Refusing to eradicate them is a fool's gambit. We squander eons in the darkness, while they seize our triumphs for their own. The mantle of responsibility for all things belongs to Forerunners alone. Think of my acts as you will, but do not doubt the reality. The reclamation has already begun, and we are hopeless to stop it.
Halo 4 is a story about humanity, not as a species, but as an idea of character. This story was expertly told when it comes to the writing of the characters, but that isn't the only thing. The story, as it is without any context or background, is still one of the best in the Halo series, but not the complete package. When this first came out, the reception was very mixed, but now it is positive, still with the lingering ideas for when it first came out. Some thought it was dramatic, others thought it was the pinnacle of deep storytelling. I thought it was incredible when I first played it, and I still do, but there's a lot more that goes into this than just a meter system. So how was the story really? So the first thing that I want to touch on is the tone of story. This is definitely not your average Halo story. Halo 4 has a lot more character-driven cutscenes where it's just the characters talking. The conclusion of Halo 3 has Master Chief slowly scaling up the Dawn away from a Halo ring prematurely firing and exploding. Halo 4's conclusion has John aimlessly staring at planet Earth in a quiet setting. Halo 4 focuses much more on the characterization and personality of the world, while the original trilogy focuses a lot more on the grand scale of the universe. This isn't better or worse, it's just different, and it is the reason for most of the things that happen the way they do in this game. Now, as I have said many times before, the Master Chief is one of my favorite characters ever, and probably my favorite video game character ever. Now, this is true for a lot of people, but I think the reason for that is the same as why so many people would like Mario or Doomslayer. It's because their entire design and aura is just beyond iconic at this point. But the biggest reason that I love the Master Chief is because of the character that lies beneath the design. John. John lived a normal life in the Halo universe up until he was 6 years old. He and many other children were kidnapped and had their lives stolen. They were taught to be killing machines, but at the same time, the kids would form a bond because they were in it together. Their bond is what formed their humanity. Halo 4's story starts out with showing us the origins of John and a boy sitting on a bed trying to process what had happened, and his brothers and sisters that he would make along the way would have no guarantee of staying with him. Some died in the intense training, others from the augmentations, and later, some would die on the battlefield. John always had humanity, but as the war mindset started to become more real, he would eventually become a cold being that would hide underneath his suit. With all the things that he loved becoming more vulnerable and moving further away from him, he started to gravitate towards the only thing that he was taught, the only thing he knew, to be a weapon of war, but still having a sign of personality and character underneath his suit. The original Halo trilogy would end up not using John's cold and isolated character to explore those areas in their stories, and they didn't have to. Bungie's Halos used John's character as a way for the player to be put in his boots, to further enhance the experience. And this wasn't out of character. This was the case in Halo 4 up until Cortana started to have her issues. It takes the vulnerability of his longtime friend for John to start showing more of his character, not because of plot convenience, but because of his care for Cortana. John has always cared about Cortana, but he never had to truly express himself because there was usually only an objective to do. But in Halo 4, where not only does John see that Cortana is losing hope in herself, she is also in a state of mind where she is worrying about him. They both know how much they mean to each other, and this brings out parts of John that we don't usually see. You'll notice how every time Cortana opens up to John, she shows an extra expression of concern because she truly cares about him. And as she starts to think about her end, she also thinks about John. She talks about which one of them is the machine and how they were both supposed to take care of each other. And even though she expresses herself a lot more, she can see the humanity in John. John is at his core broken, and his humanity within him is what makes him such an interesting character to me. And he is very well written in Halo 4. Every line of dialogue, every pause, every action just feels like it was meant to be there, and it all comes together for an interesting and compelling character arc. In the beginning of the game, everything around him is the usual, but it isn't until Cortana starts to make him feel things that he wasn't ready for that his mind starts to go in every direction. His only certainty being on the mission at hand, but his emotional maturity not being fully developed, and many other things that come with having a broken childhood, start to pile onto him when his best friend's survival starts to become more uncertain. And when Cortana sacrifices herself for him, he completely breaks with little to no way of being able to process the grief that comes with what had happened. And it isn't until he realizes what Cortana truly meant that he starts to discover what his humanity truly means. He was able to save himself from becoming a cold war machine. And at the end of the game, when he is able to truly process himself, he takes off his armor. He was able to finally accept himself for who he truly was because of his friendship and relationship with Cortana. Now, I want to talk about the characters. Excluding Chief and Cortana and the Didact, which I'll get to later, none of the characters in this game are boring or bad, which is a good thing. A lot of people, however, like to compare these new characters to the old characters, which I think is completely dumb. It's like when people compared the Star Wars characters from the sequels to the OG trilogy, which is just dumb. Don't be those people. Lasky has a very good energy and respect about him, which I think makes him a good and interesting commander. Palmer is a bit arrogant, but I think it works because at the end of the game you see Chief looking past her, which symbolizes her significance to somebody like Chief. Del Rio is a bit controversial, but I already explained him away. I think that all the characters in this game are pretty good for what they needed to be. The focus on this game was Chief and Cortana, so yeah, that's what it needed to be. Good job 343. Now, the Didact. The Didact in Halo 4 as he is presented is just very confusing to the average player, to the point where the player might take a step back and conclude that 343 tried to make this guy as Shakespearean as possible to make him sound cool, but really, he's just saying nothing. But when you see the terminals, dude, that could not be further from the truth. The Foreigners had ordered roles for their people, kind of like a caste system. A foreigner would have their life chosen for them, and they would go through a disturbing process called mutation to better fit themselves for that role. They had their entire choice of life taken from them, and they were forced to become something. The Didact was born into being a warrior servant, a soldier. He lived his life to be the best he could be to be a warrior servant, and not by choice. He eventually came to power and got a wife, the Librarian. However, as time passed and the Foreigners would get into more conflicts, his humanity slowly slipped away. His fear and concern of the flood and humanity drove him to be more fit for his role of warrior. And in the peak of the war against the humans, he started to do atrocities and compose them. He lived to be as effective and cold as a leader, so he felt nothing when doing these things. And eventually, he completely lost himself into just being a machine of war. And the Librarian was the first to notice. She had lost who she originally married, so she put the Didact to rest in an unending meditation so that when he woke up, he would find himself again and improve himself and his mistakes. The truth is that Halo 4's story with all the context is one of the best I have ever seen, dude. It might even be as good as, if not better than Halo 2 for me. The problem is that this is not how the story is, and it is a tragedy that it wasn't better. And to be fair, it would have been very ambitious to fit all of this into one game. I think maybe a dual perspective with both the Didact and Chief would have maybe worked, but it is much easier said than done. And that is my biggest problem with the story. It just has so much that is explained, or better explained, in other media that isn't the game itself. The Didact and Chief really are two sides of the same coin. When Chief and Cortana are manipulated to release the Didact from his meditation, the Didact doesn't come out with acceptance. He comes out as a cold, broken soul, with the only thing on his mind being war. His humanity being completely washed away to the point where he wants to finish a war for a species that has been extinct for eons. And when he first sees Chief, all he sees is a human that reminds him of his anger towards the race, that they have not yet earned the mantle of responsibility. And when the Didact yet again confronts Chief on the light bridge, he calls him warrior and recognizes the Chief's mentality in war. He respects him. The Didact is what would have happened to Chief if he was to be completely shut out of his humanity. But with Chief, there was still time, and the Didact dies alone, with no loved ones around him. And what ultimately saves Chief from himself are his loved ones, his friends, the people that care about him. The Didact and Chief had one of the most compelling contrasts in all of gaming for me. And if the Didact was more expanded upon within Halo 4, this story would have probably been my favorite ever. It really is a shame, but at the same time, really well written. Overall, Halo 4 is the best story in video games with the most things that could have been improved, if that makes any sense. If everything presented through the expanded lore was somehow worked into this story, it would have been the best ever, no question. However, the story ends up feeling a little confusing for an average fan, but the writing is enough to keep anybody hooked with the engaging plotline of John and Cortana. Yes, the Didact being overpowered kind of clowned on the stakes, and there were some times where Cortana maybe didn't have to be as dramatic, but the story is still very good. The themes of humanity within the armor and the narrative of Cortana and Chief is just so well done and engaging to me. Definitely the best part about this game, and the reason I love the Master Chief so much, the story. So yes, Halo 4 is a good game. The story is good, the graphics are good, the Spartan Ops... Damn it. Forgot Spartan Ops. Alright, so Spartan Ops. Spartan Ops. Look, this gets a lot of hate, and I think as much of as it's probably deserved, I also think it's really cool. And to me, a well-executed idea, kind of, for the most part. Spartan Ops is basically like a post-campaign story that goes into more of Infinity and Requiem. And I think that is a genius idea. And the story didn't come out too bad either. However, it did replace Firefight, and that is why people have such a negative mindset towards Spartan Ops. But how was it really? The story starts in a Pelican with a group of Spartan 4s that we haven't seen before. Fireteam Majestic. And these characters are actually pretty unique and likable. Now, I haven't done any research on why people hate Spartan Ops, so take what I say with caution. I think these guys have some very good energy and chemistry, and I enjoyed not only this cutscene, but all the other ones. Spartan Thorn is a really good idea for a protagonist. He is like a version of Noble Six or Master Chief, but with a compelling curiosity about his universe. I find him to be a very enjoyable character. And the other ones are all decent to great too. I think the only kind of bad guy is like the follower type bully hyper up guy. I can't remember his name, but yeah, he's kind of lame. But yeah, that's the only problem I have with these characters. The fire team arrives at Infinity, and the game treats this like a really big deal, and I find it really intriguing. These guys have never really had a big mission probably, so working on the biggest ship in the UNSC would be a big deal. It kind of gives off more of a smaller perspective to the universe. The Spartan Force kind of have that Marine or ODST energy, so yeah, I really like this. They then meet Palmer, and yes, she is still unhumble, but my guy, it's a try to feel bad for you challenge if you cry over this. She then gets them to work, and the fire team tries out their new armor. Palmer then goes to the bridge to meet up with Lasky, and we get more of their relationship. And the fact that they are just both in this scene is all I wanted. It is amazing how much this normal interaction adds to their character. Also, Roland, Infinity's AI, is really good. But now we have finished the first cutscene. Now it's time to play as Fireteam Majestic in this campaign. Now, right now you're thinking, yo, why do we have her multiplayer armor? So, you think it's okay because Majestic did have pretty basic armor, but then some random kid comes in the comms and calls you Fireteam Crimson. This is because Spartan Ops is not a campaign. It is just Spec Ops with cutscenes, which is not what I like. So this is the reason I don't like Spartan Ops, but the story is still good, trust me. So to start, while Palmer is hyping up the Spartans on Infinity, she reveals why the Covenant are even on Requiem. Like I said, there are a lot of things that in Halo 4 that are just not explained. The reason the Covenant came to Requiem is because, well, I should probably explain what the Covenant in this game even is. Obviously, the real Covenant died in Halo 3 when Truth died. This is the new Covenant, like, just leftovers of a faction that still believes in the religion of the Covenant. So, this new Covenant thought that Requiem was the home of their god, the Didact, which this new Covenant is led by an elite Julian Dama, which he calls himself the Didact's Hand. So yeah, not the most creative faction, and 343 has definitely done better with these Covenant sub-factions in the future, but we're not here to talk about that right now. But yeah, Spartan Ops is just like operations on Requiem to take control of it from the Covenant and then to study it probably, I don't know. So basically, Fireteam Garbage, the one you play as, brings back a foreigner artifact back on the Infinity. Then, a bunch of scientists try to transport it, but it EMPs the entire ship and sends it heavily off course. So they get the main scientist guy, Dr. Glassman, to check out the artifact. He touches it like 3 times and then gets sucked into it. So then, because of Glassman's absolute embarrassment, Lasky brings in Halsey, a war criminal at this point. But she is considered in universe to be like the smartest human alive, I think. So anyway, yeah, this was awesome and kind of missing from Halo 4. We never really saw Halsey after the first cutscene, and she was a big deal to John and all the other Spartan 2s. And honestly, she was written well in this game. But we'll get to that when we get to that. So then Halsey, being much better than Garbage Glassman, analyzes the artifact without getting sucked in. She tells the team to go to the engines, and that's where they go. And then we get a really good scene that kind of highlights most of what I like about Spartan Ops.
Why do they have us guarding some old lady?
She's bad news, man. Mad scientist stuff. She created the original Spartans. Master Chief?
No way.
Yeah. Yeah, story goes, she kidnapped a bunch of kids.
What? What would an old lady like her do with kids?
First, we taught them how to be silent. Then we taught them how to be Spartans.
The world building of Spartan Ops is one of the most underrated qualities. Like the fact that the Spartan 2s and their operations are like ghost stories is really interesting. And the way they talk about her makes me like these characters, dude. They're kind of struck in a state of curiosity, and I find it kind of funny. And then Halsey says what she says about the Spartans, and it's perfect contrast that fits her character. And we see Palmer take that jab like it hit her straight in her ego. Her cockiness almost has a sense of seeking approval, even if she doesn't know it. But yeah, I really like that scene, and there are more scenes as good as this, but it really just follows the same principles as this scene. So yeah, anyway, Halsey gets to the engine room and starts looking through the computer. She figures out that the artifact is having those reactions because of the foreigner technology used on Infinity, and the fact that they are straight above a foreigner planet. Then, the scene cuts to the introduction of the Covenant on Requiem, and even though they don't speak English like in the original Halo trilogy, they are still as interesting. I really like the Covenant's interpretations of foreigner technology as like religious symbols. So yeah, garbage guy Glassman has teleported to Requiem and was captured by them. So now they're trying to force him to help to open some sort of communicator that allows them to talk to their god, or as we know her, the Librarian. So then Spartan Thorns decides to monitor Halsey for the day, and as he is arriving to her cell, he has a slight banter with another Spartan. And I guess a compliment I can give this writing is how real these people sound, how convincing they are within the universe. And that is something to appreciate. So anyway, Thorn escorts Halsey to her workplace and they have some interesting conversations. I feel like Thorn's curiosity and Halsey's knowledge makes up to be very engaging and interesting in scenes. Anyway, while Halsey is talking to Thorn, she comes into Signal with someone on Requiem. She hides it from Thorn because she knows it's probably not okay that she is doing this behind Infinity's back. So then Palmer and Lasky figure out that Julian Dama is on Requiem. Halsey talks more and hides more, and then it cuts to Julian Dama. We see that Glassman is working on trying to release the Librarian, but with no luck. Julian Dama becomes more frustrated. Then, Fireteam Majesty brings back a Promethean Knight thing, and Halsey studies it. We see that the composer firing at Earth in Halo 4 did do damage, and that the Promethean was created from the composer firing at Earth. Halsey walks out and Lasky and Palmer follow her. We then see that Halsey has been talking to Julian Dama. However, Palmer takes her touchpad and hands it to Lasky. Then, they decide to lock Halsey up again for betraying them. Then, Thorn, who I forgot to mention lost his family to the composer attack, goes and looks at the artifact. He gets sucked in because he is one of the dumber Spartans. Thorn then teleports to Requiem and gets canned on by a few elites and he gets captured. We cut back to Halsey and she's being questioned by Lasky and Palmer. She defends herself and says that she does what she does for knowledge. Then Roland comes in and says that Thorn is on Requiem. Then we see that Glassman has activated the Forerunner device, but not to contact the Librarian. It kind of just does something, and then while the Covenant is distracted, Glassman starts running like an idiot. Then Joel and Dama notices this and sends a guy to get Glassman. However, Glassman runs into two elites which happen to be transporting Thorn, which that in itself is kind of garbage, but then Thorn is able to gather the strength to take down the elites and uses Glassman's vesting to blow up the reinforcements. Now, something that I have to say, and this goes for every game ever, cutscene fight scenes are almost always garbage in action games because it will never be consistent. There will always be some BS that happens within the scene that will just make it feel out of place. And that is why making the Didact boss fight a goddamn QuickTime event was so gay, because it was a fight scene. Of course, making the Didact overpowered didn't help at all, but I'm getting off topic. If you see a fight scene in an action game, turn your brain off. So then, we see Halsey in a jail cell of some sort being interrogated by Roland, the AI. And then Halsey tricks him by getting him to say a phrase that essentially overrides Roland to do anything that Halsey tells him to do. So Halsey uses Roland to gain full access to a terminal and learns about the Librarian and Jewel and Dama. She also learns that the Master Chief is still alive, which don't get me wrong, I like this because I do know how much of a big deal this is, and the scene is actually not bad. But how the hell did she not know? Is Master Chief being alive like a secret that is being held from the public? No. So how did she not hear anything while on the Infinity? But yeah, Roland does this Cortana move and regains control and arrests Halsey again. They then meet up with Lasky, and Halsey slaps him for not telling her about Chief. And then they get attacked by Prometheans. They are able to get away. There are now Prometheans on the ship though. So Lasky and Halsey get rescued by Palmer and they get back to the bridge. But then a knight teleports to them and pushes Palmer out of the way before taking Halsey. Palmer then fails the try not to get super mad challenge and smashes the digital $5,000 map. We then cut back to Thorn and Glassman and we see them walking. Glassman gasses out and has to rest and then they get ambushed by an elite. Thorn takes him down and tries to smash him with a rock, but the elite reverses the position and breaks Thorn's face with the rock at full force. However, Thorn gets revived by Jesus, so the elite takes out a sword and gets shot in the back. The rest of Majestic is there to save Thorn. They banter a bit before discovering a map. We then see that Halsey got teleported to Jewel and Dama. She is able to activate the device correctly and rushes in before Jewel and Dama to talk to the Librarian. Captain Lasky has a talk with Oni and they tell him to kill Halsey. Lasky doesn't want to do this, but Palmer decides to take direct action and kill Halsey herself. Palmer has been shown to have a lot against Halsey. So then, we see Halsey talking to the Librarian, and the Librarian gives her two keys that, when combined, reveal all of the Forerunner technology in the universe. However, when Halsey gets out, Jewel and Dama quickly takes one of the parts from her. Meanwhile, Lasky does not want Halsey to get killed, so he orders Majestic to save Halsey. Majestic gets to Halsey and finds her to be in pain under Jewel and Dama. Halsey quickly throws a piece of the key to Thorn, and Palmer is able to shoot Halsey in the arm because, she's trying to kill her. The Spartans fight through the many forces, but Jewel and Dama is able to escape with Halsey. Palmer rages, but Thorn tells her what Halsey gave him. Jewel and Dama make sure that Halsey, now unconscious, gets put on the Phantom to go. He tells all of his troops to move or they will die with Requiem. He activates some terminal and starts moving. Lasky and Glassman figure out that Requiem is now moving towards the sun because of the Forerunner tech on Infinity. It is pulling them with it. The Covenant successfully slip spaces out of there, and the Spartans get moving to get the artifacts to deactivate the Forerunner stuff on Infinity. The Spartans are able to free Infinity and they quickly get on board. Infinity makes it out and survives. They also are able to take half of the Forerunner map. However, the other half is still with Jewel and Dama, and Halsey, who is now angry that she was almost executed, she tells Jewel and Dama that she wants revenge. But only a dumb guy believes that. So yeah, that was the entire Spartan Ops story. And before I get into my overall thoughts, I do have a few things to say. the first thing that seriously disconnects me from the story and the entire argument of if this is a campaign or not is the fact that you play as just plot convenience. That's what you play as. Fireteam Crimson is like when you hand your little cousin an unplugged controller so he feels like he is playing too. Like, seriously, it is such a disconnect to play as some almost fake fire team. Spartan Thorn, because of this, is in a weird place where he feels like a protagonist, but he really isn't, because you don't even play as him. You don't play as any of them. This really just makes the story within the context of this being a campaign suffer, because it is just out of place. This was obviously more aimed to be more like a Spec Ops type mode. However, the levels in Spartan Ops are actually bad level design, dude. Because of the disconnect, the story is not what keeps you going, so you just end up playing half-ass made Halo 4 levels. And you can imagine how bad that really is. The best part about Spec Ops and Modern Warfare 2 is that they were all unique and all of them were different. The type of thing where you would want to get higher scores, you know? But here it's just like super boring levels with Halo 4, and this satisfies nobody. I guess they got the story going for them, but it ends up feeling like the story and levels are two different things. So yeah, in the end, Spartan Ops is really hard to give my opinion on. It is a thing where I really appreciate the story and the world building it added to Halo 4 and Halo in general, but any story progression just happens in the cutscenes, and the game part of Spartan Ops just sucks ass. I'm not a big fan of Firefight, but hell no, I wouldn't take this over Firefight. Spartan Ops adds almost nothing to Halo 4 to me, because if we're only talking story, I can watch the cutscenes on YouTube, you know? And Fall of Reach, if it was just included with Halo 5, that wouldn't mean anything because it's just a film. But yeah, I do appreciate the idea of Spartan Ops, but its execution sucks ass, dude. But I like the story and would love to see these characters return. Halo 4 in the end was a great first impression of 343 and their new direction with the Halo franchise. The multiplayer, while on balance, can still be a lot of fun, and the game had some of the best custom games we have ever seen in Halo. However, it didn't have that competitive rush that I like most about Halo and what got me into the series. It didn't have all those moments of pressure that I love so much and what I look for most in the Halo multiplayer. The campaign level design had some great set pieces and moments, but when stripped down, you're left with some bad enemy design that is just frustrating to fight and almost basic level design. Really, where there is most to appreciate is the story. While having problems with the context and background, this is some of the most deep and profound writing in the gaming medium. Of course, this story will be one of the biggest what-ifs because of how well written the Didact was, and to see more of a focus on him and any other missing background in the story would have made the story one of the best ever, if not the best ever. The themes of humanity is what makes Master Chief one of my favorite characters ever, and this story one of the best stories in gaming ever. And it is all because of Halo 4. I give this game a 7 out of 10, with some of the highest highs and lowest lows in the franchise. But if anything, this game deserves respect and appreciation for what 343 was able to do. Goodbye, guys. I'll see you in the next video.